The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. Let's talk about France. France was, when I was there in September, it was extraordinarily calm, peaceful, great weather in Paris. No riots to talk about. But all of a sudden, French President Emmanuel Macron has some real problems to contend with, including the violent protests that have been taking place. And Macron is reportedly considering emergency tax cuts to quell these violent protests, which potentially would actually worsen the problems with budget deficits that France is having. The government is more and more worried that the economy is threatened by demonstrations against fuel taxes, which have now spiraled into demonstrations against Macron's policies more broadly. There have been calls for the French president to resign. You will note, or you may know, that Europe already has pretty significant gas taxes as it is. And this is a real problem. And there are considerations, Pat, of no confidence votes against Emmanuel Macron in France. And a lot of people are just unaware of truly how bad it's getting there.
Yeah, I mean, say what you want about the merits of the argument, whether or not they should raise the gas tax or not. You got to hand it to them. I mean, they're politically protesting, and it seems to be working. I mean, if Macron wants to find a solution, do away with the tax hike that was set to take place at the beginning of the year, that goes to show that if people do actually take to the streets and protest their hearts out, they can impact the country and affect change.
Well, there is a figurative and a literal fire that needs to be put out here. And there's a sort of double-edged sword. On the one hand, you have activism that might work. On the other hand, you have, from the point of view of the French administration, I would call it a pretty realistic assessment that if you immediately change such significant policy on the basis of some protests, do you hurt your own credibility? And like you said, Pat, that's separate from what the right policy is. Obviously, the right policy for the country at the time is the one that everybody should be prioritizing. But I understand wondering whether you hurt your own credibility by appearing to be so quickly swayed into changing taxes on the basis of protests.
That's absolutely right. And I do think they're probably between a rock and a hard place here, because the French economy is doing relatively well, I think, as you know, on par with the rest of the world's economies. So if there was ever a time to raise taxes to affect budget imbalances, it would be now, because you don't want to do it when the economy is in a bad place. That typically doesn't go well. And if they can't get those tax hikes done now, they'll probably never be able to. And there's also a case to be made that it shouldn't be done with regards to like gas taxes, fuel taxes, because that tends to hit the bottom income levels disproportionately. But they may not be able to solve the budget problem if people take to the streets every time they try to affect tax rates.
There's another issue, which is that of climate change, because we know that taxing pollution is actually a really effective way to influence people's behavior. The problem with a gas tax is that it is extraordinarily regressive in that it affects, like you said, people who have less money and earn less money are much more affected by gas taxes than are people who have a lot of money. So you are going to get people to curtail driving with something like a gas tax. We're now kind of on a tangent from the specifics of this, but we know that taxing pollution in general is effective. This is where the concept of a carbon tax comes from, and that's another element to this, which is the climate change perspective. I genuinely have no idea what's going to happen, and I have cousins who live in France, and I haven't spoken to them about it, but I was thinking of sending a message to them later today. It is, you said rock and a hard place. That's a pretty good analogy here, because I can identify why every possible solution is potentially problematic here. Here's another interesting story from Europe. Dutch entrepreneur and self-help guru Emil Ratelband is 69 years old. He has been denied a request to legally change his birth certificate to say that he's 20 years younger. Okay, he filed a motion to drop 20 years off of his life in order to have better chances on the dating app Tinder. So his idea was, I am being, in a sense, discriminated against on the dating app because I'm 69 years old. I believe that I am biologically much younger, that my doctor agrees I have the body of a 45-year-old, I think he said, or something like that. So why can't I just legally change my age from 69 to 49? And then I will be in what he described as a luxurious position on the dating app. A judge said no, saying that the law assigns rights and duties on the basis of age, such as the right to vote, the duty to attend school, and that unlike, this is underlying this, Pat, this is connected to the anti-trans movement, which has sometimes argued, sort of facetiously, or maybe not, that if you can change gender, why can't you change age? Can't I just say, I really feel like I am a 40-year-old. I am a 60-year-old who is in a 40-year-old body, and therefore the law should recognize me as being 40 years old. And what the judge is pointing out here is that unlike with gender, there are rights and duties that exist based on your age. I don't think you can really make that case with gender beyond just what bathroom you're allowed to go into, maybe in some countries, whether you're allowed to serve on the, quote, front lines in the military. Do you like this explanation from the judge as why he can't change the age that he legally exists as in society?
I do like the explanation. The other explanation that I like is that there are other methods in place to try to counteract age discrimination, mostly having to do with like employer laws. But also, if this is stemming from him just wanting to change his age on Tinder, can't he do that without changing his birth certificate? Like, I mean, I'm sure you just like fill out, I wouldn't know, of course, but from what I've gleaned from medical journals, I think you just
Yes.
put in what your birthday is, and he can lie about what his birthday is. It's not like you need proof of your actual age. You don't have to show up to the office of Tinder and provide your birth certificate.
I think that one article I read says either that you can do it, but strictly speaking, it's against Tinder's policy, so that, you're sort of violating the rules. Someone else commented on one of the articles saying that Tinder pulls your age from Facebook so that you can set the ages of people you're interested in matching with, but that you can't actually change your age because it pulls your birth date from Facebook. Now, if you don't have that information on your Facebook profile, then maybe you do set it yourself. I don't know.
Man, I love it. He doesn't want to lie. He wants to be authentic, so much so that he's willing to fabricate his age through the legal method, and I think that's all well and good. I mean, the case that he makes about him actually feeling like a 45-year-old and having the body of a 45-year-old, I mean, you could just show that with your pictures on the dating app. I think that would be the solution.
Right. If the guy genuinely presents like a 45-year-old, that should be abundantly clear to all of his potential suitors on Tinder. Hey, for a while, it looked like Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen was going to lose her job. She now is expected to survive at least this initial post-midterm election cabinet shakeup that Donald Trump has been kind of teasing for a couple of weeks now. And it appears as though it's the caravan that she has to thank. She was about to be fired by Donald Trump. Trump said she's not a strong enough defender of the border. And now, all of a sudden, she has taken a much tougher approach towards the caravan of those Central American immigrants who are heading towards the United States. It became a campaign issue. It worked arguably somewhat favorably for some Republicans in some parts of the country. And it seems that Trump is finding himself sort of impressed with Kirstjen Nielsen all of a sudden. And 5 sources within the administration, Pat, are saying, it looks like she's going to remain. She's going to survive, even though Trump's been complaining about her for about a year. Good for her, I guess. And in a sense, if the idea was to replace her with someone who's even more of a hardliner, it's kind of better for everybody that she's staying.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, it's pretty easy to keep your job in the Trump administration. You just have to be completely loyal at all costs and sacrifice your integrity. Like, she can just do whatever Trump asks her to do all the time. She can praise Trump even when he proposes terrible policy ideas and terrible ways to deal with immigrants and the border crisis, so-called border crisis. And it looks like she is going to find a way out of this. So good for her, like you said.
Really funny, one of the sources that spoke to Politico about this said that Trump was really impressed with a very aggressive Facebook post that she made. I mean, it's total social media. it's hire and fire by social media. It's announce policy by social media. It's block people on so everything is happening via social media. And one of her Facebook posts is part of why she may survive in Donald Trump's administration. Would we have guessed this 8 years ago, even, that this is the role social media would now have in politics?
And the other thing is, like, it's amazing that the public knows that the Homeland Security Secretary could be fired any day, or with Jeff Sessions' instance, like that the Attorney General could be fired any day. Like, you'd think that people who work at the highest levels of government, who have achieved so much, should be able to keep this sort of thing confidential, no?
Yeah, so there's two elements to that. One is the Donald Trump administration has a major problem with leaks. So a lot of the stuff we find out because it's leaking, because the people in the administration are horrified. But he's also just saying a lot of the stuff on Twitter. Like, normally you would keep these personnel decisions private, and then you would announce them only after decisions have been made. Trump teases firings on social media, which is definitely very unlike all prior presidents. But, you know, it's only like the 12th wackiest thing that has even happened this week when it comes to the Trump administration. Send me your thoughts. Do you like that Trump telegraphs his pleasure or displeasure with staff on social media? Or would you prefer that it be kept private, confidential, and a little more professional? Let me know. We've got a brand new show and bonus show for you coming up tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.